Welcome to the night gallows. Creepy forest. Haunted mansion. Creepy apparition. Scary stalker. Welcome to the night gallows. Scary stories.
Chapter 1. The Last Screening. The old Regal Theater stood at the end of Elm Street, its once grand facade now faded and peeling. The marquee, which had once announced the latest Hollywood hits, was now blank, save for a few stray letters that clung to it. Most of the town's residents had forgotten about the Regal, choosing to frequent the new multiplex on the other side of town. But for those who remembered, the theater held a dark secret. It was a chilly October evening when a group of teenagers decided to break into the Regal. They had heard the stories, of course, tales of a projectionist who had gone mad, of audiences who had disappeared during screenings, and of eerie whispers that echoed through the empty halls. But to them, these were just stories, meant to scare little kids. They wanted a place to hang out, away from prying eyes. And the Regal seemed perfect. The front doors were locked, but a side entrance gave way easily. The lobby was dark and musty, the scent of old popcorn still lingering in the air. The group made their way to the main auditorium, their flashlight beams dancing over the rows of tattered seats. "Let's see if the projector still works," said Jake, the de facto leader of the group. He climbed up to the projection booth, and after a few minutes of fumbling around, the old projector whirred to life. The screen lit up, showing a grainy black and white film. The group settled into the front row, laughing and joking as the movie played. But as the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the theater began to change. The temperature dropped, and an icy wind seemed to blow from the screen. The characters in the movie began to look directly at the group, their expressions twisted in anger and malice. Suddenly, the film cut to a scene of the very auditorium they were sitting in. On the screen, they could see themselves, looking confused and scared. Then, from the back of the theater, a shadowy figure began to approach them. It was the projectionist, his face pale and eyes hollow. He moved closer and closer, reaching out with long, bony fingers. The group screamed and scrambled to their feet, but the exit doors wouldn't budge. They were trapped. The last thing they heard before everything went black was the eerie laughter of the projectionist echoing through the theater. The next morning, the town was abuzz with the news. The group of teenagers had gone missing, and no one could figure out where they had gone. The old Regal Theater stood silent and empty, its secrets locked away once more. But every now and then, on a cold October night, you can still hear the faint sound of a projector whirring and the distant screams of those who dared to enter. Chapter 2. The Search. The disappearance of the teenagers sent shockwaves through the town. Parents held their children a little tighter, and whispers of the cursed Regal Theater spread like wildfire. The local police, led by Sheriff Daniels, began an immediate search. The last known location of the group was the old theater, so that's where they started. Sheriff Daniels and his team approached the Regal with caution. The stories about the theater were well known, but Daniels was a man of logic. He believed there was a rational explanation for everything. The front doors were locked, just as the kids had found them, but the side entrance was ajar. The officers entered, their flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. The lobby was just as the teenagers had left it, with footprints in the dust leading to the main auditorium. The officers followed the trail, their senses on high alert. The auditorium was eerily silent, the rows of seats standing like silent witnesses to the events of the previous night. Sheriff Daniels motioned for one of his officers to check the projection booth. As the officer climbed the stairs, the old projector suddenly flickered to life, casting a dim light over the room. The screen showed the same grainy black and white film the teenagers had watched, but now it was different. The film showed the town, its streets, homes, and residents, but everything was twisted and distorted, as if seen through a nightmarish lens. The people on the screen moved with jerky, unnatural motions, their faces contorted in expressions of terror and pain. The officer in the projection booth called out, his voice trembling, "Sheriff, you need to see this." Daniels climbed up to join him, and was met with a sight that made his blood run cold. The projector wasn't being run by any machine. Instead, it was being operated by a spectral figure, its form barely visible but its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was the projectionist. The ghostly figure turned to face them, its gaze piercing. "Looking for the lost souls?" it whispered, its voice echoing through the booth. "They're mine now, just like all the others." Sheriff Daniels, despite his fear, stepped forward. "Release them," he demanded. "This ends now." The projectionist laughed, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "You cannot stop what has already begun," it said. "But if you wish to join them, stay a while. The show is just beginning." With that, the figure vanished, leaving the officers in stunned silence. The projector continued to play, its images growing darker and more disturbing. Daniels knew they were dealing with something beyond their understanding, something ancient and malevolent. The search of the theater yielded no clues about the whereabouts of the missing teenagers. But as the days turned into weeks, more people began to disappear. The town was in the grip of a terror it couldn't explain, and the old Regal Theater stood at the center of it all. Chapter 3. The Final Reel. The town was on the brink of chaos. With more residents disappearing each day, fear and paranoia ran rampant. Many families packed up and left, while others barricaded themselves in their homes. But a determined group, led by Sheriff Daniels, refused to give in to the terror. They were resolved to confront the malevolent force at the Regal Theater and put an end to the nightmare. Daniels gathered a team of volunteers, including the town's historian, Mrs. Whitman, who believed she had uncovered the origin of the curse. According to her research, the projectionist was once a man named Albert Grimes, who had been wrongfully accused of a crime and lynched by a mob in the very auditorium of the Regal. His spirit, filled with rage and a thirst for vengeance, had bound itself to the theater, feeding off the fear of those who dared to enter. Armed with this knowledge, the group devised a plan. They believed that if they could find Grimes' remains and give him a proper burial, the curse might be broken. With a sense of grim determination, they entered the theater one last time. The Regal seemed to sense their presence, the atmosphere heavy with malevolence. As they made their way to the auditorium, the projector once again sprang to life. This time it showed scenes of the town's past, including the fateful night of Grimes' death. The ghostly figure of the projectionist appeared on the screen, his eyes filled with fury. "You cannot save them," he hissed. "This is my domain." Ignoring his threats, the group began to search the theater. In the basement, hidden behind a false wall, they discovered a small room. Inside, chained to a chair, were the skeletal remains of Albert Grimes. Beside him lay a reel of film labeled The Truth. Daniels and his team carefully removed the remains, while Mrs. Whitman played the film. It showed the real events of that fateful night, revealing Grimes' innocence and the identities of the true culprits. As the truth was unveiled, the atmosphere in the theater began to change. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. The group gave Grimes a proper burial in the town cemetery. As they laid him to rest, a soft breeze swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint sound of a projector whirring and the distant laughter of children. The curse of the Regal Theater was broken. The missing residents returned, with no memory of their time in the theater's grasp. Life in the town slowly returned to normal, but the events of those dark days were never forgotten. The Regal was renovated and turned into a museum, dedicated to preserving the history of the town and the memory of Albert Grimes. The old projector was put on display, a silent reminder of the power of truth and the cost of injustice. And while the Regal never showed another film, on certain nights when the moon is full and the wind is just right, you can still hear the faint sound of a projector, followed by the soft applause of an unseen audience forever enjoying the show.
If you enjoyed these stories, please give a like and subscribe for more haunting stories. And remember, you never know what might be standing behind you watching your every move.